I have a seemingly simple question. What do you know about the first video game you ever played? Do you even remember which game that was? I nearly forgot what that game was for myself, only having my memory sparked by binging movie playlists and analysis videos on YouTube. To bring in the new year, I thought it'd be appropriate to give a retrospective on my first video game ever, The Land Before Time Big Water Adventure. Now, two things are vital for you to understand why I structured this video in the order that I did, and the length of time of this video. First off, I'm just going to be honest, this game is not very fun to revisit whatsoever. It has aged terribly almost across the board, and the only time I ever liked this game more than any other game was when this was literally the only game I had ever played. For a game called Big Water, it's ironically incredibly shallow in scope. And secondly, while I tried my best given how little I could find anywhere on the internet about this game, the majority of my information outside of playing this game myself comes from fan wikis. I could not find a single quote or interview from any of the developers. Speaking of the development, that's a perfect segue into the first chapter. The Land Before Time Big Water Adventure released to the public November 27th, 2002. How long had this studio who released it been working on it? Good question. No answer to that anyway. Who released it? Well, that was published by none other than CE Digital Illustrations. Who are they? Good question, given their only overly generic name. It would be actually incredibly hard to find anything about them through my research. I put in CE Digital Illustrations, I got nothing. Then I tried adding the last name of the lead director, Mr. Corvo. Still nothing. I thought maybe there was a connection with DICE, the company behind Battlefield, but despite the incredibly similar name, it doesn't look like DICE published this. The Wikipedia page for TDK Mediactive lists DICE as the publisher, but they're not on the disc, and the citation for the claim doesn't mention the Land Before Time game or DICE whatsoever. So the publisher route is thoroughly dead. What about the devs themselves? Now, TDK, the original parent company, is an absolute electronic giant whose history dates all the way back to 1935. Like any mega corporation in this capitalist dystopia, they own more assets than the human brain can comprehend, and the subsidiaries are endless, and the numbers these guys are playing around with are in the totals of billions of dollars. Talking about TDK is like talking about the French Revolution. Once you start explaining it, you can never stop. It's like quicksand. So this is me acknowledging a larger TDK corporation and lore, for lack of a better term, exists, but we can't get into it. Thankfully, their subsidiary that actually developed the game we're discussing today is way less expansive. TDK Mediactive was started in 1999 as a subdivision of TDK's European media branch. Remember what I said about endless subsidiaries? Well, this studio didn't actually start in 1999. TDK Mediactive started in 1999, but the development studio that became that existed for years before under the name SoundSource Interactive, and later renamed to Take-Two Licensing before finally becoming part of the TDK cacophony. And my goodness were they prolific in pumping out licensed games. 34 games in only 5 years, in fact. That includes some real curiosities, like Spy Muppets licensed to Croak, 2 Dinotopia games, a Casper the Ghost game, He-Man Power of Grayskull, and so many Shrek games. Shrek Fairy Tale Freakdown, Shrek Wreakin' Havoc, Shrek Super Party, Shrek Treasure Hunt, Shrek Extra Large, Shrek Hassle in the Castle, Shrek Swamp Kart Speedway, and last but not least, Shrek. Just Shrek. And oh my goodness, almost all the covers look absolutely cursed. I mean, just pure nightmare fuel, some of these. On top of all of that, they managed to publish some Land Before Times games as well, I guess, giving me the first video game that I ever played. Now, that development studio certainly no longer exists. In 2003, they were bought out by Take-Two, who in turn merged them into the broader 2K Games group in 2005. Which in a way is very poetic, as I'd become a huge fan of the 2K games when I got into elementary school around that time, especially NFL 2K. That was awesome. But this game, Land Before Time Big Water Adventure, while it may still be somewhat hidden, is still with us and thankfully isn't fully in lost media territory. The gameplay is incredibly simple. It's a very traditional 2D platformer. You do these sections either as Littlefoot, Sarah, Spike, or Ducky. You collect tree stars in each level to progress. Of course, you could beat the level without getting the tree stars. They just unlock extra bonuses like puzzles and stuff. And each character goes through the same exact stages. There are no stages unique to any of the 4 playable characters, with one exception who has one individual level, which we'll get to later. The other 2 main characters in the game that are prominent are Petrie, who regularly chimes in to comment on your gameplay. You cannot play as him under any circumstances, as well as Mo, who hops out of the water in the background regularly. It's a relatively short game that can be completed 100% in 3 hours or less, honestly. And while it is by far nowhere near the worst looking game graphically, and the background didn't age terribly for a PS1 game, the foreground doesn't look particularly great, and some of the environments also look better than others. For example, this rocky landscape doesn't look nearly as nice as the jungle here. Also, the sound effects can get incredibly repetitive. I swear, I have Hi Mo burned into my brain.
Hi, Mo! Hi, Mo! Hi, Mo!
Even as a kid, I remember finding that pretty annoying. Speaking of sound, the composer, Dave Kerr, deserves tons of credit. While I have many critiques of the use of sound effects and voice lines in-game, I must concede, the soundtrack is actually pretty good. You've got pleasant background tracks, as well as some good tracks for racing and more intense moments in the game. The cutscenes, while visually aging quite a lot, are handled on a cinematography level pretty well too. Ultimately, this story follows sort of the main acts in the movie that Mo is in, with the main goal of the returning cast being to get Mo to the ocean, or as I call it, Big Water, while avoiding threats like the Mosasaurus, for example. Story-wise, as you can tell, the game clearly plays it more on the safe end as far as movie tie-in video games. While there is technically a way you could play as Mo, you can only do so after going through each of the 14 levels with all 4 characters. Even then, it literally is just a single level where you just jump through hoops. Which, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's kind of cool, but not cool enough to justify 56 levels of the same repetitive platforming to unlock merely a single level. Oh, also, each level has 30 tree stars, so if you want to 100% this game, you have to also collect 420 tree stars on top of that, so have fun with that. While this game is aged incredibly poorly, to put it kindly, I must say that it genuinely does hold a special place in my heart for being the first video game that I ever played, and while as an adult I do struggle to find joy in going back into it and trying to play it again, especially because of its overtly simplistic gameplay, I did genuinely have a good time playing this as a kid, and for that I'll be forever grateful. It's 22 years later and I could confidently say, Big Water Adventure, I still haven't forgotten about you. Love you all, and take care.